Hi everybody, this is Jimmy and welcome back to Jimmy Does Knitting. This is my knitting podcast where we pick a topic and we go from there. Today we are talking about drop shoulder sweaters because that's what I'm knitting right now and I am into it. Before we do that, you can check me out as Jimmy Does Knitting on Instagram and Ravelry. I am a designer. I have patterns for sale on Ravelry and that name is also Jimmy Does Knitting. You can also spend some money on me and go to Ko-Fi as Jimmy Does Knitting. Buy me a cup of coffee. That would be greatly appreciated. Helps this podcast keep on going and my creativity keep on flowing. I think that's it. I have some admin to do before we go into the topic. So let's see what we have here. I wrote it down in my little panda book that I got for Christmas. It's very cute. So I have a new design, which I didn't bring. Let me go and get it. We're back. Great start, right? So I have this beautiful scarf that I've made out of Manchelopis. This is the Sandywell Scarf, and it is a hood scarf. You can see that there's like a little hood part to it. So you can wear it as a hood or a scarf. And I think it's really cool, and it was really fun to make. It can be like this. Or you can just wear it as a regular scarf. I've sold 2 copies of this at time of filming, so not great. But yeah, I have this. I like it. I'm going to be doing a shawl version of this and see where things happen. But that's something to discuss for a little bit later. I did this out of unspun Manchelopis, did I mention that? And it is wonderful. You could do it with any worsted weight yarn. You can also customize the length, because right now it's quite long, but it's also very nice. And it's this beautiful, like, woven texture. I don't know if you can see that in this light. And so there is that. Announcement number 2. I have another podcast. Where, Jimmy, you ask? Because it's not here. The answer is on the Wool Patch YouTube channel. The podcast is called Untangled. It is with Stuart from the Wool Patch, and he's doing most of the work, so thank you, Stuart. And that is why it's on his channel. But what we do is we answer knitting questions. It's 30 minutes, no nonsense, just knitting talk. I have a Google form, which actually I can put into the description. Future Jimmy, put that into the description. And so put your questions there. We can answer your questions on the podcast. And yeah, it's no nonsense, 3 knitting questions. I mean, we do go and talk about knitting, but you're not going to hear like how my day went, how my weekend went, what books we're reading, none of that. So it is available on YouTube via Stuart of the Wool Patch, but it's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And at time of recording, it should have a couple, or at time of airing this, it should have a couple of different ones that have come out. So look into that. And if you've been a long time viewer of this podcast, I film it at night in my house, and so you can't see me. So if I wear my black, I look like a floating head, and I'm going to be wearing my colorful knits on that podcast. They're not very many, so they will recycle through fast, but you get to see me in a little bit of a different light, and yeah, it's a bunch of fun. We're trying it out, and we're going to see what happens with it, but right now we're really just enjoying creating. I don't know if it's successful or not, but doesn't matter. As long as we enjoy it and there's some sort of thing to it, we're going to go for it. Another thing, I believe this is coming out before HH Cologne, but I am going to HH Cologne. It is my first sort of like trade fair networking sort of thing for knitting. I really need to do some research. I was talking to someone earlier and they're like, what booths are you going to go? What talks are you going to go to? And I was like, I don't know. I just got the ticket. So I need to do something about that. I will be there on the Saturday. I am going to turn it into a 3-day weekend, but HH Cologne, I will be there on that Saturday. So if you would like to meet up or something, let me know. Any tips, tricks? This is my first time going to one of these things where the intention is networking and seeing more like larger vendors. I've only been to like knitting marketplace things, and that doesn't go well with me because sometimes they're just like local shops and I'm also a really bad yarn shopper. I have a ton of yarn, but like I have to have a specific project in mind or purpose for it or something. So going to these fairs and spending like all this time to get there and wandering around is a little bit like whatever. And then the ones I've been to, I've also been like the only guy and relatively the only English speaker. And it's just like, I don't know, I do a lap or two and then I go home and I may or may not get anything. And I don't know if it's really enriching. As you know, on this podcast, we really don't have acquisitions. So it's because I just don't believe this whole like yarn buying hype. Some of these people come with like a ton of stuff that they buy every week. And some weeks I have that, some weeks I don't. And we'll go over that in a second. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. If you have any tips, tricks, let me know and I will be there. Last one. Let me check my notes. Last agenda item is yarn. So this year I wanted to be, let's say, stash neutral. It's more of a tracking what comes in and what goes out, just more for like information. It's like I want to know roughly how much I get through, and I don't know if I'm being responsible, if I'm not being responsible. This last year, I think I ended up with slightly more stash than I had at the beginning of the year, but I also knit 51 projects, so I think that that's all right, considering that my stash didn't grow that much. This year will be less because I have changed stuff and the projects I've knit are going to take a little bit longer. Anyway, for those number people, grams in have been 3,398. So there were two major contributing factors to this time. Is one, I will call it the West Wool incident, and there were 25 skeins of West Wool that came into my stash. It was a little much, but it was for that Prada sweater that I want to recreate this year. So there's that. Also, La Bien-Aimée had a sale, and what I wanted to do is get some of her bases that were in the Noir colorway. So like one of my rules is I don't really buy willy-nilly, but if I can get a sweater's quantity of black yarn, I will buy it because I know I will knit it into something that I will enjoy. So the Noir base, which is just their black, they have a Blanc Noir, and then they have it on all their bases. So I bought the Veloute, which is like cashmere merino, and I bought their Wensley worsted. So I have two sweater quantities of that, and then I think that's really all that went in. Grams out was 1450, so I have a total of plus 1948 for the year, which is not great, but if I am economical about stuff, then it's all right. But I know I have the Prada sweater planned, I have a Marl sweater planned, I have another version of the Sandywell Scarf planned, and I'm working on some other stuff through stash. So I think that we will be all right. So that is the admin for this episode. Let's get into things. I'm gonna get some yarn. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Jimmy, you're so handsome in that sweater, aren't you? And the answer is, yes, I am. And I have it just done. This is my new, I don't know, sweater experiment thing that I've been talking about. And so this is the first type of drop shoulders, and we'll discuss it later. But what happened was there's this onyx color from Woolen Twine. It's a undyed DK weight yarn. It is Black Welsh Mountain and Shetland wool. And I bought 5 skeins of this when it released. I should have bought 6. Because it was only 5, I also used this, which is Blue Sky Prarie in the color Raven. This is like an alpaca, like a fingering weight alpaca. I'm not the biggest mohair person, but I really do enjoy alpaca. So I've been trying to experiment with like alpaca fluff and not mohair fluff. Do with that what you will. They gave me, I don't know, like 5 or 6 skeins. I had 4 and I bought an extra one. I did not need the extra one because this is what I have left of my 4th, and then I have a full skein of it. It's 50 grams. I don't know the yardage. I don't know this either. I think this is pretty bang on what you would think for a DK. But these two together made this sweater, which is beautiful and wonderful and everything I dreamed. I self-drafted this as a little bit of an experiment. And what I mean by that is I wanted to do a modified drop shoulder construction, and somewhat successful with that, somewhat not. So let me see if I can show you my shoulders. This shows it okay, but the deal is that I knit like ideally a little bit shorter for my shoulders. Now I did add an extra couple of stitches because I was concerned about the arm pickup because the gauge was so thick that I thought I would lose too much. The answer is no, I should have trusted my math. But ideally, what the shape looks like is you go down from your shoulders and then you go out and you cast on like a ton of stitches for your underarm, and then you go down and join in the round. I did this top down as an experiment. I would probably do it bottom up, honestly, if I was doing it whatever. But what I did is some short rows in the back to a more narrow shoulder width. I think I did it, the math, for like 38 inches. Maybe not. I don't know. Did the math for whatever I did. And then short rows in the back, and then I went down, and then I cast on a ton of stitches, and then I went down, and I did some shaping on this. So it's just a little bit of like a V. I find that is a preference with mine. It gives me a little bit better of a shape. But you can see what I did with the shoulder is I knit it down, and then for the sleeve, I knit flat until it hit about this part. And then I knit in the round and started my decreasing and all of that stuff. So what that does, theoretically, and once again, these are a little bit big, but theoretically it hits closer to your shoulder, and then it adds for less bulk under the underarm. So that way you have like oversized, but yet like fitted potentially. So I want to do a variation on this one with the Woolen Twine yarn. Eula and I need to speak. Hi Eula, if you're watching. But we need to do something about that. So like an super easy pattern, top down, drop shoulder. But I've heard a lot of people discussing about how like drop shoulders are too dropped. Like right here, you can't really tell. It's about here on me, a little bit more than I wanted. But like if we can design something that brings it up to here, I think that would be much more successful. So you can have a drop shoulder, but it fits more, I guess, like a set-in sleeve, but without all the weird shaping and stuff like that. It has a nice little marl to it, which, I don't know, I'm kind of into marl. I was against marls for the longest time, but this is it. I did like 2.5 inches of ribbing and then just did like a regular bind off instead of a tubular 2x2. I mean, it's just plain stockinette. Super boring. Because of the gauge, it went really quick. And I did a little bit of a turtleneck. It's sagging a little bit with the mic, but this usually sits a little bit higher and it really covers my neck, so it's like a mock neck. I really like that with the Lanark that I made. It came up on my neck some, and I made the cat hold by Knitting for Olive, and that also came on my neck. And I just think that I like a mock neck because my neck always gets cold, and that's whatever. So this was expensive, but the blue sky fibers being sent to me was helpful, and I really like it. I think the color's nice, the shape is nice, which is why I wanted to write it into like a pseudo make your own pattern. Like it gives you the skills to like adjust it to your body. And yeah, so looking to that for the fall, maybe. This is gonna wear so well. Between like the main wool and the alpaca, I really don't see this like pilling or becoming a mess or anything. I just think it's going to be like a workhorse sweater. I don't have a lot of plain sweaters. I don't have a lot of basics because I enjoy knitting something a little bit more complicated. So this is just a really good version of it. So this is the first type of drop shoulder sweater that I wanted to talk about, which is a modified drop shoulder. Oh, and I wanted to say that I got this tip from Roxanne Richardson. She is amazing. I get all my best ideas from Roxanne, so they're not my ideas. And that's what I got for that. So let's do that. Next, I've been alluding to this Intarsia sweater for forever, and I haven't made it a priority until recently. So let's show you this sweater. This sweater is knit with Knitting for Olive, and so they have gifted me, they gave me a discount on this yarn in order to make this design happen, which was very generous of them. It is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. I'm using the color Rust, and I am using the color Coal. And these are the two colors. I essentially wanted to do a different type of drop shoulder, which we'll go over, based on a ready-to-wear sweater that my boyfriend has that's super, super, super comfortable, but I couldn't justify like writing up a pattern that's essentially a dupe of the sweater. And it's also knit flat. So the way to get around that for me was color work, and specifically intarsia. So I wanted to recreate this sweater essentially for myself in this yarn, which is why we got it. So I have finished the body, and I just haven't made this a priority. It's not like intarsia takes forever. It does take a little bit more time, but I mean, like, this is just stockinette. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of like repeats and stuff, and yeah. So anyway, the thing being is that I had this design and I needed a motif on it. In walks Tomas Castro Neves, maybe. I'll link his Instagram below. I'm not going to show you the pictures because they can get a bit spicy. But he did this Ideal of Man series, and the Metaphysics one had this pattern on it. And so this is what I've been obsessing over, and this is what I've been doing, is this, which is a modified, well, not a modified, but it's a drop shoulder knit in pieces in intarsia, and then sleeves and stuff. So let's discuss. This is knit bottom up because it's intarsia and it's flat. So I have a tubular cast on. Oh, that's the back. I don't want to show you that. So I have a tubular cast on, 1x1 rib, a little bit of setup rows, and then we go straight into this intarsia, which is pretty straightforward. You don't really need to memorize the chart. And then you do the front. I have washed and blocked these two pieces and seamed the shoulders and put on the collar so I could do sizing for the sleeves and make sure that that was correct. So that has all been taken care of. I will give you tips on how to slide the sleeves or make modifications to it in the pattern. But there's this. The feature on this, and it's easier to tell because you can actually see the stitch pattern. You see how this goes out about 1.5 inches for the drop shoulder. So instead of this one where the drop shoulder is cut closer to the shoulder, this one, the drop shoulder extends away. So it's essentially like a tube, and then when it hits like the yoke, it goes whoop, like that. And that brings the shoulder down more, which means the sleeves are a little bit shorter. And what that also does is it adds less bulk to the underarm, and quite frankly, it's one of the best fitting sweaters that I've had. So I decided to do that. Let me take you on a tour of the inside. I've woven in my ends, so there are ends to weave in with intarsia, and you just weave them into the seams, and I just think it looks beautiful. How to do this. So I will be writing this pattern up, ideally test call for it in like March with like an August release, August, maybe September release. I want to give the testers a lot of time for this because it does take a little bit of time, but also, I mean, it's just stockinette and it's a simple pattern, but I know intarsia takes a lot of time. So that is kind of that. So I'm hoping to get this like moving a little bit. We'll see. I am currently on my first sleeve, so let me show you what a working one of these looks like. What's happening with my needle? Here we go. It is stuck on my bobbin. Hold on 1 second. So, what it is the sleeve is just the sleeve. So it starts the same way as the body. They're knit cuff up, and I'm currently increasing on the sleeve in pattern. I wanted to make sure the diamonds were like a full diamond in the center. I thought that would be nice. And then this is what the back of my work looks like. So there are tails from used up bobbins and other things. So there are a bunch of ways to do intarsia. I was a big like, you know, let's do like 4 or 5 arm lengths and then just untangle as we go. But I did a workshop with Nancy Marchant, and she used these little clips. Maybe I have a bag of them? Yeah. And these are great. This actually helped me be a little bit more organized. I have a design coming out in the fall where I was very organized with my intarsia management when I was doing it, and it like made a difference. And so when I went for the clips, I think that really was is a game changer, just because I prefer to be a little bit more neat now. There are multiple ways where you can do intarsia. We're going to talk about intarsia a lot more in the end of the year or as the year progresses, so I'm not going to give it all away. but these are what's working for me now. And I just like roll them up on these bobbins and then put a bobbin in when I need to. And then this is the back. So what I've been doing is I've been knitting everything and then sewing in ends when I'm done with the piece. And then because it's flat, you block the piece, then you seam them together. So that is that. This is my sleeve, and I'm hoping to at least get the sleeve done maybe this weekend, maybe next week, and then I can go on the other sleeve. It's really enjoyable, and I think it's going to be a beautiful sweater. Like, I'm obsessed with this, like, harlequin, clowny, but not. Like, I wasn't going to even do these colors, but this is what I had in my stash, and I swatched with it. And then after I was done swatching, I was like, okay, this is actually the colors that I want. I think this would also be really good as, like, a green and, like, a cream, or just, like, scrappy. You could do that. So, yeah, this is my Metaphysics, and if you want to test this, let me know. I will definitely be looking for testers. I would like to say that I do not write my patterns for beginners. It assumes some knowledge, and it assumes that you know how to read your knitting. Yes, I'm not here to teach you intarsia, but if you think that you can learn the techniques, then this is not a hard one to start off with. So yes, this is my Metaphysics, and hopefully test call coming in about a month. We'll see. This is going to be like a mega pattern, so it's going to be, because of gauge, I can do that. I don't like doing the math on the sizing 1,000 times. It just frustrates me, but I don't mind writing the pattern once. So I will have this as an intarsia one. Then you can modify to knit it flat. And then I'm also going to have a marl version with 2 fingering weight knitting for all of Merino, the regular Merino, because 2 fingering weight of their Merino make 1 heavy Merino. And so I'll have a marled version that's bottom up in the round, and it will be a lot easier. So yes, you can do 3 patterns with just the price of 1. But that's to come. But yes, I'm very excited about this project. It's been lingering. I started it in November, and it hasn't been a priority until recently. I knit my enigmatic, which is a fingering weight color work, and wrote up the pattern, did the sizing, all of that in that time. The Sandywell Scarf was made in that time. This sweater was made in that time. So, I mean, it just wasn't a priority, but there's that. But it needs to get off the needles. It's been too long. This is the longest whip I've ever had. So, Metaphysics, excited about this. If you want to get your intarsia boots ready, get them on hand, because we're going to go for it. All right. I have one more project of a drop shoulder with a slightly different construction, and we will be done after that. This next one requires some visual aids. Oh, and maybe this book? Yeah, let's get this book, and we'll talk about it. So, I'm slightly obsessed with a Guernsey, Vissers Trui, whatever you want to call it. I am kind of obsessed. I knit one, which I will show you in about 2 seconds, in the beginning of my knitting career, and then I knit one last fall for my brother-in-law for Christmas. Big hit, great. But I also over-ordered yarn, which means I'm forced to use the yarn in another project. And that project is going to be, for me, in a Guernsey. And that's exactly what I want to do. So, the inspiration. We're going to go a little bit over how I came up with the motif and how I designed. This was the original one I did. And can you see this motif? It's a ladder stitch and then cable, and then some sort of ladder, and then a cable. I essentially wanted to do this, but full length. I wanted something linear where the pattern went all the way down. I know there are ones with stripes, I mean, you've seen them 1,000 times. There's the whatever, but a plain stockinette and then something on top, or they're all striped, and that's not the look I wanted. I wanted full length this time, because I already have one with just the pattern on top and then knitting on bottom. This, by the way, is a self-drafted pattern done in Rowan felted tweed, and a strand of whole super soft and black. Held together. Now, for all you early sweater, knitter, garment people, look. This is one of my favorite sweaters. And also, look at the pilling. Do you see it? I mean, there's a little bit. But like, this has been worn probably the most out of all my sweaters. And there's like not much pilling. It's wearing great. But you beginner sweater knitters, you don't have to be great. This was a Fix It February situation before. Did the pattern that I create like work well? No. It didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. There were some weird things. There's no gusset on this. The armpit was like really high up, like really high up. I had to take out the collar and re-knit it. And then also when I re-knit it, it kind of looks like garbage because I did something weird with it, which I'm not going to show you. So like 2 learning curves with the collar. At one point I had to cut off like this much of the bottom and like re-knit the hem, because the hem was like this big, and then the bind off I used for the 2x2 ribbing was like weird that I got off of something, and it just wasn't good. So feel free to fix your knits so you will wear them, and just know that if it's not perfect, you still might love it. And you know, this is, if I had to redo this, this would look well, it would look the same, but it would fit completely differently, but I still love it. One thing that I wanted to modify is I didn't want the same central motif because I've already done it, right? Like I want something a little different. So I wanted a different central motif. And then also if you look here, there's some filler stitch, which is this moss stitch. And that just is like stitch used to get the numbers that you need. So that will be relevant later on. So, right. Where are we? In terms of design, central panel is what I wanted to do first. Let me show you some pictures. I have this book, which is Fisherman Sweaters Collected. This is in Dutch, so we will not be saying everything here. But I wanted to show you some inspiration pictures if I can find them. This has like a ton of fisherman's sweater, Guernsey sort of things. With, I think it's just like motif swatch. It's a lot of like history and a dictionary, but it's not so much like a recipe that is going to be useful. Found it. So there's this central motif. Ooh, my ring light's not good. Can you see that? I hope you can. So there's a central motif that I really liked. I tried to put it in the center. Didn't like it. I did another swatch where I tried... Where's the bag? It's in my lap. I did another swatch where I tried a different thing, but it started looking like my brother-in-law's Guernsey, and I wanted to keep that for him. So let's see. If you look at this swatch, this is the swatch that I did initially just to get gauge. This is the bottom part with the motif that I liked. It doesn't read very well. And then this one's kind of too similar to my brother-in-law's, so I decided not to. But it has the cables and the ladders. And I did this on a 3mm needle because I liked the fabric better. I am not a big like fingering weight person. And Guernsey yarn, which is a 5-ply high twist yarn, is round and bouncy and lovely and keeps you warm. But it's still, I'd say, like a heavy fingering, if I'm honest, and I wanted to be warmer in it. So I decided to go down to like the recommended needles, which is a 3mm. I think you can even go down to like a 2.5. I think it's like a US 1 maybe? US 2? I don't know my US sizes. But tight gauge, and this will help keep me warm, and I think that I will like it better. So I went down a needle size with that, and then I found one other sweater, which I thought was beautiful, but I didn't want to like essentially recreate. This one's white. This is the white one right here. Can you see this? Incredible cables. Incredible cables. And I wanted the letter stitch in between because I still wanted the letter. It's like my favorite stitch, right? So like, let's do that. But I didn't want to make a dupe. I wanted to make a variation on that. And I've also kind of been obsessed with the idea of, those sweaters that you see that are like a 2x2 cable and then like a rib and then 2x2 cable and then a rib. I wanted that, but I wanted it to be slightly different and more Guernseyfied. Is that a word? Probably not. Because my boss wears those a lot. And as much as I like that, that sort of killed it for me. So I tried another swatch with just some scrap yarn. And I tried a couple things out with like other motifs. And I think I decided on just like this stitch with the ladders in between. So that's what happened. Once again, I'm using the Woolyknit. They also sent me this yarn at a discount, so this could be happening. I used 2.5 cones on my last Guernsey, so I had like 3 and part of a cone. That's correct. For this one. This one is knit at a much tighter gauge, so there are more stitches. I think I have like 284 stitches on a needle, and that's aiming to get me at about a 40-ish inch circumference, which is comfortable, because if it's a little bigger for me, that's fine. And if it's not, then it's tighter, that's also fine. So I have this yarn. It's the 5-ply British Guernsey wool in navy, the same one I used in my last Guernsey. And I have done some knitting. Which way does it go? It goes this way. So what I've done is, this is how the motif is knitting up. And I think it's beautiful. I absolutely love it. It's actually not that hard. I mean, it is a lot of cables, but it's not that hard. And it has like a really good rhythm to it, meaning everything's divisible by like 2 or 4 or 8, both horizontally and vertically. And so it has a good sort of sense to it. If you look on the side, I put 2x2 cables next to these, whatever these cables are called. And then like a little 2x2 rib. So like 2 purls, there's like a twisted stitch, 2 purls, twisted stitch, and then the cables and cables. And so what that does is, typically in Guernsey knitting, there's like a purl stitch or some sort of side detail to keep track of where you are, whether it's like the front or back. And I did that, and I did that specific pattern to like, that's my filler stitch essentially. And what I'm going to do is carry that up and then incorporate the 2x2 into the gusset and then the sleeve, and then the other part will just come up. And what I did specifically with the math on this one is this cable specifically will come up, and that will be the end of the drop shoulder. So it is going to drop off my shoulder, but that way I think the cable just has a nicer ending. That's my plan so far. I might make this a saddle shoulder. I haven't decided yet, because I'm still on the body and this takes quite a long time and it hurts my hands a little bit. I've knit a lot on it, but I haven't knit much. So I did a 2x2 rib. I did a variation of a cast on given by Megan Babin in the Alwyn. That's knit flat, and also I do what I want. So I have no chart. I'm just making this up as I go, but that's sort of the design process with that. So this one is also going to be a drop shoulder, maybe a saddle shoulder, but a drop shoulder regardless. And what it is it's knit up in the round, and pretty much a box, like a rectangle. And then I will not do shoulder shaping or short rows. I will just do either the saddle shoulder thing and graft it, or I will do a 3 needle bind off at the shoulders. And that will get me whatever this is. So this is going to take a while. It's already super, super dense, and the cables help with that. And I think it's beautiful, and I cannot wait to wear this. I will also have like a little mock neck with it. There is like historical preference for that. So this is not like the most historically accurate, but I think it would definitely pass for a Vissers Trui or a Guernsey if you were to see it. So that is the deal with that one. And so this will be probably a long-term whip, but I'd like to get it done. I would say before spring comes, but it's always cold here, so I don't know. We'll see when I get this done. It will definitely be my main sweater project after the Metaphysics ends, and then I have planning to do for some other stuff. So there is that. And I think that is all I have to talk about today. Try to keep this somewhat short, sweet, lovely. I hope you guys are doing well. It's been a rough winter. We've thankfully had some sun, but yeah. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to move not out of anger, not out of your fear body, and just, because you're going to get hurt, right? So be kind to yourself, and please be kind to others, like human decency, please. And I will check you guys later in the next one. Goodbye.